Hello my friends, I am Chef Scott for Devil's Food Kitchen, and this is part 2 of making a chocolate Hannya mask. In part 1, I came up with the initial sketch and concept of what I'm going to do, and this week we're going to figure out exactly how to put all of these pieces together. I wanted to give you a really authentic, candid view into my design process, so in preparation for this video, I have not thought about this piece at all since the initial sketches. And that's been really hard because I'm excited to make this, so the ideas are trying to creep into the back of my head, but I've pushed them away. So you're gonna get my first impressions on how to put this together. We'll figure it out together right here, right now. I'm excited to get started, so let's do it. We're picking up here after part 1 where I created the initial concept sketch of the piece, and now it's down to figuring out exactly how all of this is going to go together. The main problem to solve is how the mask is going to attach to the center column and still give me the ability to put the chrysanthemum petals and whatever other little design elements I might want behind it. My first thought is a chocolate sphere that will go onto the stand and that can adhere to the back of the mask. The only problem I foresee with this is that the sphere may not be a large enough diameter to allow space between the back of the mask and the stand column. I need that space because I have to fit the chrysanthemum petals and glue them, and lots of layers begin to get pretty thick. If the mask is flush with the stand, I'm not going to have room to glue any of those chrysanthemum petals, and I won't get the 3D effect I'm looking for. Really, this step is just about drawing out a lot of possible solutions, kind of building it in my head, building it through illustration, seeing what might work. Most of that comes from experience. Having done this many times, having messed up many times, you start to understand what pieces might work, where you need extra strength, what's strong, what isn't strong in dealing with the chocolate medium. And again, there's no substitute for experience. You just have to get out there and try it, maybe break a couple pieces, but that's the only way to really get a handle on how to use the medium. So I'm making a little note to myself because I'm not really sure what diameter I need to create that sphere to get enough distance from the mask to the support column to still put pieces in between. And that's what I'm kind of sketching out here. Is this going to work? Not only that, but am I going to be able to wrap the flower petals up and over the top of the mask like I originally envisioned? So I'm playing with a different idea. Maybe the sphere needs to go at the top of the mask instead of the bottom, but then that leaves the center column that's too long. This is really what this is about, just sketching the idea over and over again, trying to figure out what might work. A lot of head scratching, honestly, which thankfully I have cut out of the video because nobody wants to watch that. Here I'm taking a different track and reverse engineering, starting with the chrysanthemum petals, creating the shape that I envision, and then seeing how much clearance that requires for the mask itself. During this process, it's really easy to begin over-engineering your design. I am absolutely guilty of doing that. That's not necessary. You know, we don't want to add pieces. We want to keep it as few pieces as possible because that means as few glue joints as possible, and that means a stronger piece. So I want the mask to stick out. I want the chrysanthemum petals to come from behind the mask and sort of curl around the front. But in order to do that, I need there to be a gap between the mask and the center column for those chrysanthemum petals to glue. For that to happen, I need a sphere that is a large enough diameter to sit on the center column, but then push the mask out to create that gap. I'm not sure I have a sphere that's that large in my shop, so I'm thinking of alternative options. If I can add little pieces, little connections to help elongate everything to create the gaps that I need. After a series of sketches that hopefully get me closer to the right answer, I'm creating a fresh schematic of how I envision all of the pieces coming together, but it also gives me an idea of all of the different pieces I'm going to need. For a really complex sculpture, this can be really handy because the pieces can get out of hand. I've made some sculptures that have dozens and dozens of individual pieces. It's always helpful to know what's supposed to go where. A key to my design of sculptures is to create interlocking pieces whenever possible. That is really important because it creates a ton of strength. In this case, I've got a little stone that's going to sit between the base and the support column. And I'm going to create just a small insert that will fit into the base. That's just extra surface area for gluing. It creates a really strong structure. After a lot of sketches of what I think will or will not work, I'm landing on the sphere in the center support column, and then a little extra extension attached to that sphere that will sit onto the inside face of the mask. This is going to push the mask off of that center support column and give me the gap I need to glue all of the chrysanthemum petals behind it. Just like when I was drawing the concept sketches, I repeat my sketch over and over again, really to just better understand it. With each iteration, I learn a little bit more about the design, and it starts getting me thinking about little details that I wouldn't think about if I only drew this one time. In this case, I have my sphere and the little protrusion that's going to glue to the back of the mask. I think that might need a little bit of extra reinforcement. The mask might end up pretty heavy. We'll pull a lot on that little protrusion. So by backing that up with a piece that attaches to the support column, we get a lot of strength. With this last sketch, I'm really feeling like I have a solution here. I understand exactly what I need to put everything together, and I'm ready to move on to the final blueprint before we actually start casting chocolate. The first step in creating the 1-to-1 scale blueprint is laying out some parchment paper and taping those pieces together so I have one continuous work surface. I just use painter's tape, or you could use Scotch tape or masking tape. Now I'm going to start to pull the various rings and molds that I have around my kitchen already to create the finished product. And all of these things need to be measured to make sure that they fit the dimensions that I outlined in the initial concept sketches. This is the first time I'll see the piece in its actual dimensions, and I'm still free to edit here. There's nothing holding me back from changing any dimensions at this point, because until you see it in this 1-to-1 scale, you don't really know what everything's going to look like. A design on paper, even in an accurate but smaller scale, can look totally different when it's at full size. So I leave myself the opportunity to make any changes here. I'm using nothing more than an ink pen, a ruler, and a square. I call that a square because it gives me square 90-degree angles, but if you purchase one yourself, you'll be looking for something called a triangle. Rest assured, I know my basic shapes. I learned them last year. This is a good example of why it's important to create something at a 1-to-1 scale. During the last stage of sketching, it seemed like I wouldn't have a sphere large enough to solve the engineering problems that I had. But now that I'm seeing it in real size, the egg mold isn't quite as deep as I was sketching it, and the sphere mold I have is larger than I thought. So it turns out that little extra protrusion that I drew may not be necessary. We'll see, I can always add it later, but this is the power of the 1-to-1 scale. You really start to understand how things are going to fit together. I really like the proportions of the antlers to the mask in the initial concept sketch, and I want to keep that in the 1-to-1 blueprint. So here I'm using digital calipers to get the length of the mask and the length of the antlers in the sketch, and then with some simple math, I can create a equal ratio in full size. Now, of course, you don't have to use digital calipers. This is an extra level of precision, although I do recommend them to everyone. They are so useful. It should be standard issue. You're born, you get your digital calipers, and then you go out into the world. And I do mean simple math. I was a terrible math student in school, so if I can do this, anybody can. And for anyone interested, I've included the equations I used in the description. Once I have all of the forms laid out the way I want them, some of the more organic shapes, in this case the antlers and the kind of stems and chrysanthemum petals below, I'll trace over in Sharpie so that they're really bold and clearly defined, because I'm going to use this as a template to create those curves in chocolate, and I want them to be exact. Tracing them in Sharpie just makes it easier to see and use as a template. I'm also tracing over that center support column in Sharpie because I know I need to make a custom mold of that. And again, doing this in Sharpie is going to be easier to see than the pen. It's going to be really easy to trace that out as a template to make my mold. Now I'm starting to envision just how tall this piece is going to be, what it's going to look like. I think it's going to be pretty cool. This is the part where I get really amped up to start working with some chocolate and getting this thing together. If I was ever planning to make this piece again, now I have a blueprint that I can always hold on to and use to create my molds and templates down the line. I'm feeling pretty good with the direction of everything right now. I think it's safe to say that step 2 is officially complete. In step 1, we started with our concept sketch, and from there I was able to create a sort of blueprint that gives me the idea of how I want everything to go together, how I want all of the pieces to fit, and what molds I might need to use. From there, I was able to create a blueprint in 1:1 scale. So this is the real world size of the finished piece. This is useful because it gives me an idea of what it's going to really look like, but then also as a reference for any templates I might need, including custom molds. Most of the molds I need for this piece, I happen to have in my kitchen already. I've got an ice cream mold, a cake ring, and of course the egg that's going to be the mask. But if I need any custom molds, like for the base, I can really easily make them using the foam core technique and my blueprint. So all I have to do is trace that shape from the blueprint, transfer it onto my foam core, and I know that the mold box I make will be the exact size and shape that I need to fit the piece. So next step is getting chocolate ready, tempering it, and getting into molds. And that's the really fun part because this thing starts to come alive. Can't wait to show you that video. That'll be coming up next, so stay tuned for that. If you like this video, I hope you consider subscribing. If you are a subscriber, thanks for joining the community, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss another video when it pops up, including the other videos of this series. This is an exciting one. I'm really excited to show you the rest of this. Until next time, I'm Chef Scott for Devil's Food Kitchen.